Hey everybody, thanks for tuning in to another Cruiser Chat with Otram. Yeah, so we didn't have internet here at the house when I got home last week, so no chat last week. And then it was spotty this morning because we've had storms rolling through, so I didn't do the update for chat to be upcoming because I wasn't sure we were going to have internet when I got home today. But we do have internet, so we're all good. And the 5K local races that were on Tuesdays ended this past Tuesday, which was the reason I switched to Thursday for a couple of weeks. So we'll be back to the regular schedule of Tuesdays next week, assuming internet and all that jazz works. Yeah, I'm still in my work clothes. We were working on installing a new two-post lift to give us a bit more productivity. So that's exciting. We're getting the new half of the shop all set up. Let's see. The timing chain truck is all back together and running. The blue 40 that's been in the background of a bunch of videos, it's back together and running. And the 3FE swapped 80. I'm just about finished with steering on it. I'm just waiting on a couple of tie rod ends. And that one might actually drive tomorrow. I got the drive shafts made. Steering box and column are all done. Yeah, everything underneath is painted and back together. So it's coming along. It's been a slow process, but it's getting there. But yeah, no super plan for this evening. Just whatever questions you guys have, I will try to answer them. We may not have a ton of people tune in tonight since I didn't post up to advertise that it was going to be tonight. But yeah, we got a gantry crane from a buddy of mine a few weeks ago, and we've used it to swap a couple of motors in the last couple of weeks. And man, I don't think I'll ever go back to using a cherry picker to pull motors. The gantry crane has just made it so much nicer. It's so much easier, so much safer feeling. Like we dropped a whole 80 series drivetrain in, and it took like 20 minutes to get it bolted up. There's just so much more maneuverability with the gantry crane. So since all the engine swaps have been going very easy with the crane, but we don't have room for the gantry crane on the other side of the shop where the lifts currently are, we got another lift. So we're putting a lift in over there. Hopefully I'll get that all set up this weekend. We got the columns upright this afternoon, and then I realized that I left all my hammer drill bits at home, so we couldn't actually anchor it down to the floor. But everything's laid out and squared, and the columns are where they need to be, and we pulled my 80 in to make sure that we were going to be able to maneuver to the lift because it's kind of at an odd angle to the door. But we made sure with my 80 we could get on and off the lift easily enough. So yeah, things are coming along. Trying to think if we've got anything else new. We had an All Man Emu BP51 shock set delivered today at the shop to go on a 200 series. It'll be my first time seeing the BP51s in person. And man, those things are nice. It depends on what vehicle. As far as how much the suspension install goes. I'm assuming you're talking 80 series. And I would have to look it up to be sure. If you go to our website, otram.com, there's like a request an estimate button. If you if you fill that out, that'll get me, all the info I need to shoot you over an estimate as far as what labor would run. We don't normally do customer supplied parts, but like on some of the suspension stuff that we can't easily get through our local distributor, we make exceptions on things like that. And the Iron Man stuff we can't get through our local guys. So that fits. And as far as the center diff, we just have to, go through it and check the electrical and see if it is actually working, or if just the lights aren't lighting, or if one of the limit switches isn't telling the lights to light. There's a couple things it can be. Yeah, shocks and springs aren't too bad without a lift. You'll want, a tall set of jack stands to give you enough room to get the axle drooped out, so that you can wiggle the springs in. I use our low rise lift a lot of times to do suspensions, just because it feels more stable. And when it's raised up, it's about the same height as a tall set of jack stands. And to JW, I'm pretty sure I responded to that. Normally, we do the head gaskets in the truck. The couple of times, like the recent video where I had the engine out, we had the engine out because we were also doing rear main seal and the front cover seals. And it was just easier to pull the engine and do it on the stand, since we were doing the head gasket and the rear main. It was just easier to do it on the stand, and it gave me a chance to film it. But most often we do them in the truck. Oh, that's burned us a couple of times lately. We pulled one like a week and a half, 2 weeks ago. Pulled the head in the truck to do, we thought it was valve stem seal oil consumption. We got the head off, and it's actually got really weird scoring on the cylinder walls. So that one, we're going to end up pulling the engine, which is going to be tricky now that the head's already off. But it's getting a new Toyota short block, so that'll be a fun project. Yeah, and it's not terribly horrible to do it in the truck. I mean, it's a lot of bending over, and being in awkward positions. But it's not horrible. I mean, we do 99% of the head gaskets in the truck. I just figured while the engine was out, it'd be easy to shoot a video, because then you could see everything without me trying to shoot around fender wells and stuff like that. People have been asking for a head gasket video, but until we had the engine out, I hadn't been able to figure out how to film one where you could actually see everything. The biggest piece of advice: get a second person to help you pick up the head when you go to lift it off the motor. Because if you bump the timing chain guides, it's very easy to crack the plastic on them. And if you crack the plastic, it's no good, because you got to pull the whole the oil pans, timing cover, everything. And yes, it is absolutely crucial to send the head to a machine shop. I mean, I hear about people just slapping them back on, and I can't imagine that works. At the bare minimum, you want the deck skimmed so that the head's back to flat. And our machinist also vacuum tests the valve sealing, to make sure the valves are good. But yeah, we've had a couple that were warped enough that there is absolutely no way they would have sealed, just being slapped back on. You're going through that much effort, to pull the head and do all the gaskets. The 150, $200 to get the head skimmed for that peace of mind, um, is well worth it. I want to say I usually use a 6-ton jack stand, which, like, the import 6-ton jack stands all seem to be about the same height. And yeah, you're gonna want to do one end at a time. I would not put all. Yeah, I wouldn't put both ends up on jack stands. That's gonna get too squirrely. And there's a really good chance you'd drop your truck. Even doing it with just one end up on jack stands, it's a bit sketchy as you're pushing and shoving things around. Um, you could push it off the jack stands. Our local guy just raised his prices, and he cleans the head, pressure tests it for cracks, um, vacuum tests the valves for sealing, and skims it. And it's usually right around 180. If it ends up needing valve work, it goes up quite a bit from there. But so far, I've only had one 80 series head need valve work. All the rest of them, he's always been, yeah, these seal fine, leave them be. Yes, we have internets. And just to be sure, I went out and trimmed all of the trees yesterday, which I took a pole saw to the head while trimming trees. So I bled for the internet yesterday. Um, I would check around, and get recommendations, um, for somebody to do the head. We've got a couple of well, we don't have any local shops that do head work anymore. They're all over an hour away. The guy that used to be in town didn't do great head work. He did my Supra like probably 15, 20 years ago, and he didn't get the head surface smooth enough. And I was using an all metal head gasket, and you could slightly smell coolant until everything warmed up. But it's been that way for 20 years. And then we had another local shop. I never had them do a 1FZ head for me, but they did a couple of 2F heads. And the 2F heads came back with crappy surface finish on them. And the guy I'm using now, I've been using him for 6 or 7 years, and he just does really, really awesome head work. So yeah, I've stuck with him. So I would ask around for recommendations. Um, yeah, and 150 doesn't seem too hateful, for head work. I mean, that's what my guy used to be. And to getting stripped oil pump screws out, don't try to drill them out. You're gonna go crooked and drill into the timing cover. It's easiest to weld nuts onto the stripped screws and then pull them out. We get it quite a bit when the last guy in stripped all the screws out, and then it comes to us to get the oil pump cover done. Have I ever removed the rear slider windows? I have. You can pull and reuse the gasket that's on there. If you look in our videos, there's a video of me doing Yoda Tech Gull Wing. gull wing rear windows, and it'll be pretty much the same process as doing those to pull your windows in and out. It's not a lot of fun. I usually have the glass shop do it. That's next door to me, just because I hate roping windows in and out. But it is doable, and it wasn't horrible. You more than likely, if you're going to go through all the trouble of pulling the sliding windows, the the rubber, I'm going brain dead. The rubbers that they actually slide in, like not the big one that holds the whole window frame in, but the actual slide rubbers, you may want to consider replacing those. We've seen those dry rotten on a bunch of cruisers. Do you need at least a 36-inch breaker bar to break the crank nut loose? I usually put a jack handle on my 36-inch breaker bar to break the crank nut loose. Either that, or I've got a torque multiplier, which it's like a 4-to-1 gear set, and I'll use that to pop it loose. But yeah, they are. I've had them where they've broken multiple 3/4 drive sockets trying to get them loose. Usually, you can do it with a breaker bar and a jack handle on it. And I've never heard of using chrome cleaner to remove bronze tint. You see, I am not artistically inclined. So doing t-shirt designs is not my forte, which is why it's just two logos. I'll have to find somebody who's more artistic than I am to come up with better shirts. If you've got a lot of play in the drag link, that could cause vibration. More likely, it's a tire imbalance that's shaking, and then it's working the tie rod back or drag link back and forth, and that's what's making you feel it. But if there's enough slop in the drag link, because you shouldn't have any play in the drag link. But if you take the cotter pin out of the end, sometimes you can tighten the drag link up if it's on a 60 or 62 series. But yeah, if there's play in the drag link, I would start there. Oh, I wish I had friends that drive a Snap-on truck. I just have to spend all my money on the Snap-on truck. And I have not hired another tech yet. We had a couple of prospects, but none of them have panned out. And I haven't really posted it anywhere that we're looking yet, just because I've been kind of waiting until we get the new side of the shop set up, which now with the lift going up, we're getting pretty close. So I need to start putting it out there. But yes, I need another tech. We are way backed up, and it's way more work than Crash and I can do. Rear bumper tire carrier that I recommend. I really like the 4x4 Labs one, and I'm pretty sure they still offer that as a kit that you can weld yourself. That's the plan. That's what I really want for my 80. Bump it off-road's really nice. I haven't seen a SLE one for years, but the SLE stuff was nice. The Iron Pig rear bumper was nice, although I think that one might be getting redesigned. I think somebody said that a few weeks ago. But yeah, I really like the 4x4 Labs rear bumper kit, although you have to cut your rear cross member out to use it. No problem. Okay, yeah, if your tires are well balanced, then I would definitely go for drag link. Yeah, the rear bumper I built, um, the rear bumper I built in the fall. I ended up using 4x4 Labs as swing out arms because it was easier to buy his swing out arm kit than it was to build my own, and I just modified them to fit the bumper I was building. So if it's an 80, you won't be able to adjust the play out of the drag links or the drag link. But yeah, just get new tie rod ends, and you should be good to go. And luckily, they're not horribly expensive on an 80. If you're just doing a 2-inch lift on an 80, generally you don't need any alignment because you're not because the 80 solid axle. The only real alignment you can do on it is set the toe, and doing a lift kit doesn't change the toe. The only thing it changes slightly is your drag link angle, and which is going to pull your front axle off center slightly, which will shift your steering wheel slightly. So your steering wheel might be a hair off center, but you can just adjust the drag link to get that back centered and not have to actually go to an alignment shop. But it's rare that we see them with just a 2-inch lift actually knock the steering wheel off center enough that you can see it. Old oxygen sensors on my 80 are really stuck. Freol is your friend as far as penetrating oil. I just start soaking them. It's going to sound crazy, but a lot of times I'll use an air hammer to tap the nuts off. But you've got to have a lot of finesse with an air hammer. So it's not something anybody's going to want to pick up and do. I did body work for years and got real good with an air hammer. So I'll use that to get the nuts off quite a bit. But other than that, soaking with penetrating oil and heat are your friends. And short of buying Joey's oil pump seal kit, what other bits do you want to start with? We generally do the drive belts while we're in there. Usually the oil pump's been leaking enough that it's slung oil all over the drive belts. So we'll do the the alternator and the AC belts while we're in there. And a lot of times I'll do the distributor O-ring at the same time, just because it's easy to get to. Long sweeping curves at highway speeds on an FJ60 get a shimmy bounce that seems to be coming from the rear. The first thing that comes to mind is check the shock cross member that goes across the frame. I have seen so many of those rip loose of the frame and then clunk around. The other thing I would check would be the spring bushings, especially at the shackle end. If those are dry rotted and worn out, it'll let the axles swing side to side some. And to John, yeah, I get like a 12 millimeter headed nut, and you center it on the stripped out screw, and then you fill the middle of the nut up with weld, so welding it onto the screw head. And steel filler rod won't stick to aluminum, so it'll only stick to to the broken screw. You have to be careful not to arc all over the pump cover because you can like do some gouging. But yeah, I'll usually, MIG weld the nuts on there. Every now and then I'll TIG weld them, but it's a lot easier just to zap them with the MIG welder. But yeah, that the combo of welding, like the heat, seems to break the stuck ones loose, and then you can spin them out with a wrench. I've also had really good luck using a JIS number 3 Phillips and a like 3/8 impact. Like I use a little battery 3/8 impact. And sometimes, even though they look really stripped, if you tap the JIS bit into them and hit them with an impact, sometimes they'll come loose. Welding is so much fun and opens up so many doors for things you can do. For removing broken bolts, I use it for pulling bearings, like press fit bearings for rear axles. If you run the TIG torch and run a bead on the inside of the bearing, when it cools, it'll shrink enough that the bearings just fall out, and you don't have to use a puller. Uh, so yeah, welding is definitely a skill worth having. And if you check with your local community college, a lot of them have welding classes that aren't horribly expensive. And learning in welding school is definitely the way to go because you don't start out learning bad habits. You learn how to do it right from the get go. Uh, number 3 Phillips will work. A number 3 JIS, which is like the Japanese version of Phillips, is even better. The angle on the bit is a little bit different between the two. But yeah, number 3, and like I'll just tap them with a brass hammer, and that seems to shock the screw loose. And then try to loosen them with the impact. And sometimes it helps if you loosen, tighten, loosen, tighten, loosen, tighten, and bump it back and forth. You can get the screws to finally come out. And yeah, I loved welding classes. I took all the stick welding classes, and then I took the MIG TIG class twice. Um, I took it one time through just to practice, and then I took it through a second time to get certified. And I loved it. I even took I forget what they called it. It was like the metallurgy class to figure out what filler metals go with what materials for what weld. It's one of those you don't use it often, but every now and then something weird to weld comes through. And you have to look up the book and figure out what filler rod you're supposed to use and preheat and all that jazz. Top 5 reasons I love and enjoy Land Cruisers. And what series I love the most. Um, they're relatively easy to work on. Until you get into the really new stuff, they don't take a lot of specialty tools like software and stuff. They they're stout. You know, they're all like the 80 series are coming on 30 years old, and they're they just hold up well. They're beefy. Um, and it's like they actually thought through the designs, except for the 100 series. I got a lot of issues with 100 series. Um, but yeah, I don't know how many that's up to. Maybe 3. Parts are still relatively easy to get. It's crazy what Toyota can still get me, even for like 60s and 70s, 40s. Um, and they look cool. And my favorite series is 70 series, but that's probably just because we didn't get them here, and it's that wanting things you can't have deal. Favorite that we can get here is the 80 series. And to the center diff, it has been forever and a day since I troubleshot one. But if you get the wiring diagram, it's a pretty simple diagram. I would start with checking the limit switches if they go bad fairly often. Yeah, our welding instructor did let us do side projects, which was nice. If it makes y'all feel better, the center diff lock doesn't light up on my 80 either, but I haven't gotten around to digging into it yet. And it's funny, I actually fell into cruiser repair. I was originally a 4Runner and mini truck guy. Um, and I've still got my 4Runner that I got in like 95. Uh, it's just been recently that I bought an 80 series, I think December. And I had a 60 series for a couple of years, maybe 10 years ago. But I was firmly in the 4Runner camp, but everybody else in my family had Land Cruisers. So yeah, I got known for working on Land Cruisers. Yep, the 4Runner hasn't run in like 7 or 8 years, but I will never get rid of it. I've had it, uh, I guess, almost 25 years now. I don't know that I would install the switch mod for the center diff as a step in troubleshooting. I would work through it and troubleshoot it before you add more variables. And to Thomas, I am along the lines of if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Um, you can open a huge can of worms taking the head gasket off as preventative maintenance. Um, it's one of those, in the US, you're never really far from somebody that can fix a head gasket. It may be an inconvenience, but it's not like you're going to be 3 days into the bush when your head gasket blows. So my thoughts are leave it alone. Because we've seen like my truck's got 350,000 miles on it on the stock head gasket. They don't always blow. Now we do them at the shop as preventative maintenance, but it's after I tell people, hey, you could be opening a can of worms for doing, you could be opening a can of worms doing this. Um, How crucial is the shim gasket for the knuckle bearing cap on the LX450 replacing a damaged one? I'm assuming you're talking about the one that's on the 2-bolt side, like the top side of the knuckle. You need that, and you want it to be the same thickness as whatever was in there because that's what sets the preload on the knuckle bearings. If you leave that gasket or the shim out, your knuckle preload will be too tight and you'll ruin the bearings. And if you put one in that's too thick, the bearings will be too loose and you'll have slop and play, and you'll ruin the new bearings. Any new shady 80 parts added to the pile? None yet. With the expanding into the second half of the building and getting shelving and lifts and everything set up for that side, there hasn't been any extra funding to support the Shady 80 lately. But one of these days, I will get back on building that. Yeah, my Forerunner's in '87, and it was IFS when I got it, and then I ripped the front diff out of it, pulling my brother's 40 out of a river. So I solid axle swapped it with a radius arm setup and a mini truck axle, and coil sprung the rear. And then I bent those axles, so I put 80 series axles under it. So it's 3-link front and rear now on 80 series axles, and it's a lot of fun when it's running. Yeah, the easiest way to tell if your center diff is locking is to find like a gravel parking lot and do donuts, um, and lock and unlock it, and you should feel a definite like drag in the steering and like a chuk 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 pushing as you slip in the gravel with the diff locked. Yeah, that's the very scientific way we test them. We've got a gravel parking lot at work, so we just make laps around the building, and you can feel if they're engaging or not. Yeah, the upper one you definitely want that shim, and you want it the same thickness as what was in there. Ooh, T100 on an 80 series would be pretty cool. I haven't thought of that combo. I am not a fan of power flushing transmissions. I've always I've always been afraid that power flushing is going to stir up crud and get stuff stuck in the valve body. We just do drain and fills, um, and when you drain it, you normally get like 6 or 7 quarts out. Um, so we just drain it and fill it. I've never seen the ASIN trans fluid. I always just get the WS straight from Toyota. The cost of the fluid versus the cost of a new transmission. Uh, I always just stick with exactly the transmission fluid that the automaker calls for. So I always just use the factory Toyota WS in them. I have mixed feelings on the new Supra BMW setup. I haven't paid a lot of attention to it, but I really, really, really hate BMWs. So it makes me sad that the Supra uh, is crossbred with a BMW. Yeah, I don't know how I feel about it. I uh, I, I I don't really like the BMW aspect of it. Back in the day when I was in the body shop side of things, I had to work on a couple of Z3s, Z4s, and man, were they just put together terribly. And if that's the way the new Supra is going together, yeah, I guess yeah, Cruiser Shooter is exactly right. I'm mad that they used the Supra name on it because I don't think it's a Supra. Uh, yeah, I mean, I almost wish they would have like hopped up the FRS and called that the Supra. Um, Time delay when going into reverse. A lot of times when we see that, it's low fluid in the transmission. So check your trans fluid. And you've got to make sure that when you check it, the engine is running and the trans is in neutral, because it'll look a lot higher on the stick um, when it's off. How often should the transmission fluid be drained and refilled on an '06 LX470? That is a good question. Because I'm pretty sure, and I haven't looked through the maintenance guides in a while, I'm pretty sure Toyota considers the WS fluid to be a lifetime fluid, um, which I don't exactly agree with because you're going to get wear in fluids and heat damage and stuff. Um, but I don't have a specific schedule for the drain and fill. We just do it when people ask us to, as bad as that sounds. Uh, yeah, so unfortunately, I don't have a good answer there. Yeah, I would just stick the T100 on top of an 80 frame. I think that would be the easiest way to go about doing it. I think it was a first gen Forerunner that had been dropped down on an 80 series frame, and it looked pretty good. Now, T100 being a little bit longer, a little bit wider would probably fit even better. You don't like our way too many books and not enough bookshelves? That's after taking a whole bunch of them to the donation place at the library. Ooh, one JZ swap would be nice too. I had a buddy with an '86 pickup with a 7M GTE in it that was a lot of fun. To get to the fuel filter, easiest thing is to take the driver's side tire off, and go in through the little access hole in the fender panel. And when you go to put the new fuel filter on, it's got two bolt holes. The one that faces towards the engine, snip the bracket to make it U-shaped so you can start the back bolt first. And then you just slide the fuel filter on and put the easier to get to bolt in afterwards. Um, but yeah, it's not a particularly fun job. But yeah, just going in through the driver's side. I am not a fan of any American engines going into any Toyota product. Um, I feel like you buy a Toyota for the reliability, and putting in American parts just defeats the purpose. Um, yeah, I'm not a fan of the American vehicle swaps. Oh, 73 Celica would be nice. I had an 81 Celica, and I think that was one of my most favorite cars ever. It was so much fun to drive. I'm fairly certain the T100 is an 8-inch rear and a 7.5-inch front, but I'm not positive. Yeah, the nut that we weld on the oil pump covers, that is with the truck in the engine, or with the engine in the truck. Radiator is out, so that gives you a little bit more room. And yes, usually I do it with a MIG welder, with the gun upside down, coming down from the top. Um, it's kind of some acrobatic welding, and it's not it's not fun. But a good auto dark helmet and some hemostats to hold the nut in place make it not a terrible job. I've done them TIG welding them as well, but it's a lot easier to get the MIG welder in there and just kind of blast it than it is to try to get the TIG torch down there. Um, if I could swap any Toyota engine in the 80, well, the overseas ones already come with it. The diesel 6 cylinder um, is awesome in the 80. I really like those. I think the 5.7 out of the 200 series or the Tundras would be super awesome, although I don't know if it would fit. Uh, the 4.7 even would be nice because the 4.7 seems pretty bulletproof. And the best way to find a good used 80 series, you wait for your dad to get tired of all the parts trucks sitting on his driveway and you wait for him to get rid of one cheap. That's how I got the shop truck. Otherwise, I've seen a lot of them coming up on Facebook Marketplace lately, fairly cheap. Um, but yeah, I hate mud, classified, Craigslist, Facebook Marketplace. Just scour them and take your time, find the right truck. We just had a truck come through with the second fuel filter mounted next to the first one. So your guy's definitely not the first one. Uh, yeah, it's crazy the things we see done to the fuel filters. Um, and how do I hold the nut, the stick, and the gun when you TIG weld the nut on? Uh, I've got a pair of hemostat, like clamping needle nose pliers that I hold the nut with, and then I'll do a lot of stick out on the TIG torch, and I'll do a tack with just the tungsten going down the center of the nut, and then I'll go back with filler rod, uh, which makes it that's why it's way easier to do with the MIG welder, because you can just hold the hemostats in one hand and buzz the MIG welder up in the center. Yeah, like our local Facebook marketplace, I've seen 4 or 5 80 series has come up this past week. And all I want is a milling machine, but they keep showing me 80 series. See, you just have to wait for my dad to get tired of the 80 sitting in his driveway and he'll sell one. You could buy his white 80. Paul Elvisser is awesome. And that 7MGE swap in his mini truck. That was a forerunner. That was a first gen forerunner. Was awesome. Yeah, him and Fry Daddy were a trip. I haven't seen them in years. But he walked into our camp at G Smitter one year and threw a can of beans in the fire just to watch it explode at everybody. Yeah, Paul's a good dude. Yeah, I follow Paul and Fry Daddy on Facebook. I guess they crew a monster truck team now, and they're going all over the world with monster trucks. So keeping Japanese, what would I put in the Shady 80 when the engine needs a swap? Um, at 350,000 miles and the way my engine sounds, it's probably going to need a swap sooner or later. My first choice would be a fresh 1FZ with Joey at Wits End's turbo kit. I think that's going to be a super awesome combo. Second choice would be a 5.7, but I don't know if that fits, and that would get really expensive. Third choice would be a 4.7, which I've seen done, which would still be expensive, but the way the 100 series is and Tundras are rotting out around here, I should be able to uh, pick up a rotted out carcass cheap and take the drivetrain out of it. Any plans on a new video soon? I just did the timing chain ones, I guess a couple of weeks ago. We haven't had anything like new and exciting come through the shop lately to video. Once we get a little further along with setting up the new half of the shop, I need to do like an updated like shop tour video now that we've got way more space. Um, but yeah, nothing really coming up new and exciting soon to shoot video on. That's part of the problem. Like we do the same repair over and over and over again, and we've started to run out of stuff to shoot videos on. I don't know anybody in northern Jersey, but if you go on I Hate Mud and go to the clubhouses forum, the guys in Gotham City Land Cruisers, like the New York, New Jersey club, likely know somebody. But I don't know who the guys up that way are using. Some of them are coming all the way down to us, but that's quite a hike down from northern Jersey. It's probably like 4 hours. Yeah, I do need to start doing like basic maintenance videos like belts, hoses, adjusting wheel bearings, um, stuff like that. I shot a video on doing the 80 series rear wheel bearings while I was doing the rear brakes on the Shady 80, but the footage is all messed up and I haven't been able to like edit it together in a reasonable fashion. Yeah, I'm glad you guys dig the chats. I figure, I learned everything from the old school Land Cruiser mailing list and I Hate Mud and trial and error. And I never really have the time to go on the forum and like look through and answer questions. But doing the videos and live chat is, something I can pretty easily fit into the schedule. And it's fun to see what everybody's working on around the world. And I'll have to check out your cruiser video. Yeah, the chats are fun. I was bummed out when we didn't have internet last week. I was going to say something else, and I'm completely drawing a blank now, and I can't remember what it was. Yeah, we've been having a bunch of crazy thunderstorms coming through, and Memorial Day weekend, one of our big trees in the backyard lost a whole bunch of limbs, and took out what I thought was the old cable lines, like the old phone and cable lines off the back of the house because they were dangling in the yard, but we still had internet. So I figured they were the old ones that weren't getting used anymore. And then I came home and we had no internet last Thursday, and the lines had been moved. They're still dangling in my yard, but they had been moved. But they did come out and fix up my new line. So yeah. So I'm friends with Luke on Facebook, but I don't know that I've ever met him in person. I'm almost positive I have, but I can't remember. But I really, really love his four-wheel drive 80s Toyota minivan. Yeah, it's like is it four-wheel drive specialties, something like that. It's Luke's shop. Best way to check the ECT button to see if it works. I guess the easiest way would just be, turn it off, floor it on the highway, and see how it feels. Turn it on, and then take another spin, and it should hold the RPM higher before it downshifts to the next gear. Beyond that, you just have to go through and do electrical pinout, but I've never actually checked the ECT button before, so I've never messed with it. Yeah, I'll shoot over after chat and check it out. Actually, I will write myself a note because I will forget. But yeah, I've been following Luke's Facebook page for the business as well, and he's got some cool projects coming out of his shop. And yeah, it's specialty four-wheel drive. I do need a plan to make it back down to G-Smitter. I haven't made it since I think 2008. Like I had a really good run going. I went from 99 to I think 2008 consecutively. Cool. Yeah. Thank you guys for tuning in. I'm going brain dead again. I'm going to jump off of here myself to go feed the dogs. Oh, that was the other thing I was going to say. Once we get the other half of the shop sorted out, we're probably going to do a big open house, grand reopening thing because we never did an open house grand opening when we moved into the shop. We've done a couple of tech days there with the local club, but we never had a festival. So I'll be sure to put that on here for anybody that's localish when we're going to do that. But yeah, I'm going to jump off of here and get dinner started and get the dogs fed. But thanks to everybody that tuned in. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. And if you really dig the videos, check out our link to our Patreon site because the help is always appreciated in making new videos. But I will catch you guys next week, and we will be back to the regular Tuesday schedule next week because the 5K races that were on Tuesday are over. So I'll be home on Tuesdays again. Anyway, thanks for tuning in, and I will catch you guys next week.